Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Development Standards. Do we have any apologies of absence?
Yes, Convener, an apology from Councillor Cheap.
Any other apologies? No other apologies. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Councillor Fotheringham.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Agenda item number 7, Convener, report number 387/21, the former Teeling Parish Church. Probably about, maybe 2 years ago, I was contacted by a neighbour about this this building and the lack of access to the churchyard. I made no comment. I passed it on to officers to deal with. Therefore, I will stay in the meeting and take part in any discussion and debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other declarations of interest? No. Move on to agenda item 3, building warrants. The committee is asked to note that during the period the 9th of October to the 3rd of December 2021, a total number of 118 building warrants, 4 demolition of warrants, and 18 amendment to warrants have been approved with an estimated cost of £14,193,625. Is that noted? We'll move on to agenda item 4, delegated decisions. The committee is asked to note that during the period the 9th of October to the 3rd of December 2021, a total of 98 planning applications have been approved and 2 refused under the scheme of delegation to officers. Is that noted?
Noted.
Agenda item 5, minutes of the previous meeting, is that approved or noted?
Approved.
Agenda item 6, we move on to our first planning application, which is an application, deals with the planning application by Gigabox Development Limited for the construction and operation of energy storage facilities consisting of up to 50 energy storage modules with a capacity of 45.9 megawatts, transformers, electrical control building, acoustic fencing, high access CCTV system, and perimeter landscaping on land at 1 Old Brecon Road Forfar. Good. With the slides, please.
You can indeed, Convener. Hopefully they're on the screen before you now. Is that them there now?
No.
I have them.
I've got them. Yeah, I've got them too.
I did have some slight problems this morning, but I thought it was up and running all right now, but
I've got the cover page up, item 6, planning application.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the slides are reproduced in the.
I don't have the slides yet.
You've got them now, Convener, yes?
No, I've just still got item 6 planning application, the front cover, which would be the front cover just.
That's okay. I'll start from there, Convener.
Oh, I see. Okay, carry on then.
So, as you've indicated, this is a planning application for a battery energy storage facility on land adjacent to the electricity substation at Old Brecon Road, Forfar. The report details the context of the application, but in very simple terms, it's a development that stores energy from the adjacent substation at times of low demand and provides supply at times of high demand, and this reduces reliance on non-renewable energy generation sources. So the development has a capacity of around 50 megawatts, and that offsets the carbon impact of the annual electricity use of between round about 2,500 and 3,500 average houses, excluding their heating. So this is a fairly significant development in terms of the carbon dioxide that it could offset, round about 2,000 to 3,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide per year, which is not insignificant. Back from the local development plan, and the application site is located in the top right-hand corner, just indicated with the cursor that I'm moving on the screen at the present time. So we see the development boundary of Forfar. Application site sits out with the development boundary, and you can perhaps make out the existing electricity substation that's located again just out with the boundary of the site in the top right-hand corner. So our policies indicate that we will generally only support development out with but adjacent to a development boundary where there's a public interest in the development and where there are operational reasons that justify that choice of site which cannot be met within the development boundary. And as I've said in this case, the development is intrinsically linking electricity from the substation. There's operational justification for it to be located adjacent to the substation, and we've spoken about the carbon dioxide reduction, the energy benefits that would be associated with the proposal. So this is helping facilitate the generation of renewable power, and in that respect there's a public interest in supporting the development at this particular location. Moving on, we see the site in a little bit more detail. We have the existing substation. Proposal includes provision for some additional landscaping, and the main compound associated with the proposal located just to the west of the existing substation. Development boundary that we spoke about follows the line of the disused railway line. So just in this proximity here would be the development boundary of the town. You can see the recreation ground. We have a stone processing facility located to the south of the site, and housing development that's located over 100 metres from the application site itself. Here we see the site in a little bit more detail. Total site area is just less than a hectare, but the actual development area is round about 0.6 of a hectare. So we have the compound which would accommodate a number of storage units, and each of those storage units would contain the battery technology that would store the energy itself. Each of these battery units contains a fire suppression system, so there are concerns raised by third parties regarding fire risk, but each of the units contains a fire suppression system to deal with any accidents that were associated with the proposal. You see the storage units. Each pair of units has a small 11 kilovolt transformer associated, and we have two larger 33 kilovolt transformers located just to the east of the site, adjacent to the existing substation. Access taken from old, and a control building located adjacent to that access. Maybe just also on this slide, draw your attention to an acoustic fence that would be located at what is the southwest corner of the site. So again, just a fence that's provided to provide noise attenuation for the development itself. And again, you'll see we have conditions proposed in association with the recommendation to deal with noise emissions from the development. Moving on, we see some elevations, typical elevation of the container unit itself, the small 11 kilovolt transformer associated with each pair of units, and we see a typical elevation of the control building that would be located adjacent to the access. And just a photograph that shows an example of what we're talking about, the fairly basic form of the storage containers, the transformers associated with the containers themselves. So certainly a fairly industrial development in terms of its overall appearance. We have some sections through the site. The top section is from north to south. So this is the agricultural field to the north. and at this side we have Old Brechin Road. So going through the site, you can see the container unit, the small transformer, the two larger 33 kilovolt transformers, a storage building and office type container, and the control building itself located adjacent to the roadway. Also, just point out on this slide, we have a 5-metre landscape strip between the boundary fence of the development and the roadway itself. And the proposal is to provide landscaping on the perimeters of the site. Moving down to the middle image, we have the corresponding cross-section running west to east. So the dismantled railway cutting located just at the left-hand side of the screen. We have the container units, the 33 kilovolt transformer unit, and at the right-hand side of the image would be the existing substation itself. And a typical elevation that shows the acoustic fence that would be located at the southwest boundary of the site. Couple of aerial images. They just show the context of the existing substation. We have Lunan Head at the top of the screen, maybe a distance about ½ a kilometre between the edge of Forfar and Lunan Head itself. So this area partition between the urban area of Forfar and Lunan Head itself, it's important in that respect, but the development site itself located in this area doesn't significantly alter the appreciation of the differentiation between Forfar town and Lunan Head village. Again, lying around the boundaries of the site in the areas just indicated with the cursor, which again, through time, will mitigate the impact of the development. It is industrial in nature. The landscaping will never completely screen the development, but it's going to be seen in the context of the existing substation, and as you see image, the stone processing facility also located on the outskirts of Forfar. So just again in context, we have the railway cutting in the area that we see here that represents the development boundary, the recreation ground at White Hills, application site located in the general area, and you can see the nature of the existing substation structure itself. A few photographs. This is looking in an easterly direction along Old Brechin Road. So this is looking towards Lunan Head, towards the existing substation, some landscaping associated with the substation. You can see the infrastructure associated with the substation quite clearly. Application site is the foreground area that we see here. Access to be provided roughly in the area identified by the cursor, and the 5-metre landscaping provided on the roadside frontage on the west boundary and wrapping round the northern boundary of the site. Supplied by the applicant from a similar position. This is the Old Brechin Road located just in the right-hand side of the screen in the two images. As you'll note, top image shows the vegetation at year 1. The image below that shows the vegetation after 10 years. So you can see that through time, the visual impact of the development, we do have conditions that require the detail of that planting to be approved by us. We also have a requirement that it's fast-growing native species and a requirement that it incorporates heavy standard planting so that we have reasonable planting stock going in at an early stage in the development. This is looking in the opposite direction. So again, along Old Brechin Road, this time is back towards the White Hills area. Existing substation, you see benefits from very little screening to the roadside. Application site located just beyond that, round about the location of the cars that we see here. And in this instance, we'll have the benefit of the 5-metre screening between the carriageway and the proposed development itself. And you can get an impression of that from the two photomontages here. On the right-hand side, we have the existing substation. On the left-hand side, we see the containerized battery storage, and you get an impression of the vegetation, the impact the vegetation will have on screening through the passage of time. Last couple of images here, we have a view looking across the playing fields at White Hill site, located in the middle ground, the recreation ground, distance of maybe about 30 metres to the boundary. You can see some vegetation associated with the dismantled railway line that will provide some screening. We have the stone processing facility currently located on Old Brecon Road, and you can see the pylon associated with the substation. So application site located in the foreground. And again, just a couple of photomontages that give an impression of the screening associated with the development. So bottom image shows the landscape about 10 years. This is almost representative of the view from houses in the proximity of White Hills. So you can see the landscaping will mitigate some impact in relation to views from the properties at White Hills. But this is a proposal that provides for storage of energy. It's directly associated with the existing substation location. There's benefit in it being located at that point in the town. The benefit, the co-location benefit of being beside the substation is reasonably significant in terms of reducing loss of power. This proposal complies with development plan policy. We have conditions that seek to mitigate the impacts of the proposal. Those conditions seek to address the concerns, where appropriate, raised by third parties, but the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Alan. Any questions to the officer? Are you hearing me all right? I'm getting an echo back off my Surface Pro. Are you hearing me all right? Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Right. Okay. Questions to our officer. Councillor Fotheringham.
Thank you, Convener. Mr. Hunter, just to satisfy my own curiosity, one of your slides that showed the battery storage, and in the top right-hand side there was a balancing pond. What is that?
So I think it's specifically to address surface water runoff from the development. So it's basically a suds pond. You'll note that some of the objectors have raised concerns about flooding and flood risk in the area. And the idea is that the surface water from the site will be positively managed. We have a condition that requires precise details of the surface water scheme, and again that will hopefully provide some benefit to the wider area.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Duff.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Just a question for Mr. Hunter. I note in the comments from potential objectors that neither the Health and Safety Executive nor Scottish Fire and Rescue have made any comment. I did see some comment, I don't know where it emanated from Fire and Rescue, which said that they would anticipate some sort of fire risk here, but there's nothing quoted that I can see in the paper, so I don't know whether Mr. Hunter's any particular comments about any safety issues, just to clarify that point.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Duff. I think the report indicates that Scottish Fire and Rescue offered no objection to the application. They did provide some comment on the application, and their typical approach in relation to any development is to assume that it has potential to result in a fire. That's their default position. So it's not a specific position in relation to this development, it's a general position in relation to any development. I think their general point is that this is battery technology. It's a reasonably common technology. It's similar to the technology that's found in battery powered cars. So it does have potential to result in fire. But that's true for any form of generation. It's true for the substation itself. I think what Scottish Fire and Rescue have suggested is that they have the experience, they have the ability and the training to deal with any incident that arises. And in relation to this specific proposal, there is the fire suppression equipment included within the development to deal with any incident that arises.
If this was an application for a petrol filling station, for example, they would make a similar comment. There is a risk of a fire, and that they take that into consideration.
I think that's fair comment, Councillor Duff. Yes.
Any other questions?
Yep.
I don't see I see a hand up somewhere, but I don't know who's got a hand up.
It's me, David.
Convener Moore first and then Councillor Sturrock.
Okay, Councillor Moore first, then Councillor Sturrock.
Thank you, Convener. Mr. Hunter, I'm looking at paragraph 8.5 of the report about policy DS1, and it says it's only acceptable where it's in the public interest and social, economic, environmental or operational considerations confirm that there is a need for the proposed development that cannot be met within a development boundary. Now, this is very nice to have, but is it really a need? And also, is there nowhere within the development boundary that this could be located?
So I think the applicant has provided justification for this specific location, and that justification relates to the desirability of minimising the loss of energy associated with transfer from the substation to an alternative location. So there may be locations within the development boundary where this could be located. We have employment land, for example, at Orchard Bank, which is several kilometres away from the application site. I think the issue is, as you transfer the electricity, you lose energy, and the energy loss over distance becomes reasonably significant, and that's clearly a disbenefit. It reduces the benefit, the operational benefit of the development itself. So in this instance, our policies that deal with renewable energy speak about the benefits of co-locating relevant infrastructure, and I think in this instance there are public interests associated with supporting generation of renewable energy, and there is justification for the location in operational terms.
Right, if I can just follow up on that, is this the only substation in Forfar? And if not, have our officers looked at the other substations to see if this could be co-located with one of them?
So I think the issue in this instance is not whether there are other sites, other development proposals that may or may not be acceptable. The issue is we have a planning application before us, and we're being asked to consider whether that specific proposal is acceptable. And in terms of the policy assessment that's before you, officer's conclusion is that the development complies with development plan policy.
Thank you.
Councillor Sturrock.
Thank you, Convener. Yeah, just following on from Councillor Duff, he preempted me, we're asking the same things. I take it this is going to be an unmanned facility, is it?
It is an unmanned facility, Councillor Sturrock, yes.
Okay, so in the event of any fire alarms, because it's outside the town, I take it, is there any sort of link into the telephone system to the fire station?
So I'm not familiar with the detail of that, Councillor Sturrock, but what we do have is the applicant's agent who's in attendance today,
okay,
and they may be able to provide you with further information
thanks
in
for
relation to that
Thanks,
matter.
Alan. Yep.
I see no further hands, is that correct, Sarah?
That's correct, convener. No
Right.
further questions.
Right, okay, right, thank you. We'll move on to our speaker. We have Mr. Dan Grierson, applicant's representative. Are you there, Mr. Grierson? You have 5 minutes if you're hearing me. Mr. Grierson?
He was there, convener.
I apologise.
Oh, there he is.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. You 5 minutes, Mr.
I apologise. My internet just dropped out. Well, thank you, members of the committee. I did prepare a short presentation, but virtually all of it has been covered by Mr. Hunter. So I'll maybe cut a few bits out, but I'm available for any questions.
Mr. Grierson, you're gone.
Town plan specialised in a low say before it's on electricity system connected to mute
You and just see if that helps the situation, because we're not hearing you at all.
Yes. I'll turn my camera off. Is that better?
That's better. Yes.
Right. Well, I shall continue without an image. In response to Councillor Muir's point, this is the only large substation anywhere in the locality where we think a battery can be connected. The physical presence of the substation isn't enough. It has to be a substation that has the capacity to import and export the power. So, probably about 1 in 4 substations of this scale, of which there are not many, can actually take a battery because it needs to have the capacity for the cabling. And also, if you're physically next door, you avoid any disruption or disturbance from building the cables, connecting the lines. It would be underground, but if you're a couple of kilometres away, you've got to put the cable in. So you've got this disturbance of doing that, plus the, the electricity losses during transmission. Just to reiterate, the role of the project is to. Can you still hear me? The role of the project is to import power from the electricity grid when there is a surplus of generation, to store this, and then to export it back to the grid when there is a need. And in this day and age, there's generally an oversupply when it's windy and sunny, and an undersupply when it's not windy, not sunny, and demand is high. So, practically these things import power when there's an excess of renewable generation, and then they import it back into the grid when there's a shortage of renewable generation, which means that backup generation from gas, there's no longer any coal in Scotland, so backup generation from gas is prevented or at best delayed. And a lot of these things are going in all around the UK. They're going to be probably hundreds of these things in a few years. They're essential if we are going to increase our green generation by providing the backup. As your officer stated, we have sought independent report which is provided to members regarding the decarbonisation, and in terms of the current energy mix, the project would offset between 2,000 and 3,300 tonnes of carbon dioxide per annum, which is a lot. It's a significant figure. It's enough for a not dissimilar number of households, and the project would have an operational lifespan of up to 50 years. So it's that quantity times 50. I won't go into any more detail regarding the description of the projects. That was very comprehensive on, when the site is built, put in the largest available trees that we can get our hands on, ideally from the local gene pool and local stock, to maximise the screening effect these would have on the site. The range of conditions your officers have proposed are very comprehensive and do, in our opinion as the applicant, more than safeguard any concerns people may have. I'd reiterate that conditions limit the operation of the site to up to 50 years, after which it would be fully restored to agriculture although clearly there's a case for maybe retaining some of the tree planting around the site. I'll finish now, but projects such as this are essential if we are going to move to a low carbon future, in that they will facilitate a much greater level of renewable generation by providing the required backup. This is very important as cars, other transport and domestic heating is electrified. In a few years, people are going to have batteries in their houses, especially when they have solar, etc. So they better use their own domestic generation. I have such a system myself, and I can swear by it. The technology proposed here is also now pretty mature. It's very similar to that being used in cars and other transport, and domestic batteries and consumer electronics. And recently, was a first in the world, I think, short-haul flights in the Orkneys. So even planes are being electrified. So I'd like to thank you, convener, and thank you, officers, again for your time this morning. And I'll keep online if you do have any further questions. So thank you very much.
Okay, right. Thank you, Mr. Grierson. Yes, just hang on there, and there will be questions. Councillor Sturrock, is that your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Grierson. I just have a couple of questions, and the first one was relating to the fire suppression. And did you have a link to the fire station from the facility?
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't mean to pick up. While the site is unmanned, it is monitored 24 hours. All the systems have sort of sensors and things in them. So if there were, even before a fire took hold, there'd be symptoms of maybe, things heating up, etc. So it's monitored around the clock, and if there was a problem, the fire services would be notified, well in advance of anything serious happening.
Excellent. And the final point is I noticed, and this is in relation to the current storms and the outages that we had. I see you have a 50 gigawatt storage facility. What kind of resilience does that provide if you need to use all the battery, so to speak?
Well, if there's a full outage on the grid, the battery, depending on how it's set up and the nature of the outage and where the outage is, it provides backup. They do have an emergency role. If you get grid issues where you're losing generation in various areas and frequency drops, then that's when the battery can go to full power and put out power as quickly as it can to maintain frequency levels while other bits of the grid are fixed. So they have two roles. They have the role of storing excess and then exporting this when it's required, but also if there's a problem, if you lose a connection to some generators or other generators go down, they can click into action very quickly and put out the required power.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to, I should have made clear, what sort of time frame does this go on for? Eventually the batteries will run down, yeah?
So the startup time is milliseconds. They're very, very quick. A 50 megawatt battery will provide 50 megawatts for an hour, or 100 megawatts for 2 hours. So that's how they work.
Okay.
If it's working flat out, it'll be 50 megawatts for an hour, which is...
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions to Mr. Grierson? Councillor Durno?
Thanks for your presentation there. I just wanted to ask, obviously the community in this area are not too impressed by the fact that what the plans are, etc. Do you have any plans to work with the community on any community projects to, as I say, alleviate their problems, their worries about what the building's going to look like? Obviously you can't change that. It's going to take 10 years for the trees to grow up. Is there any community projects that you could work with to help the community with the tourism, etc., so they can work in the area around your project?
There will be a community fund. The developer does offer a community fund, as standard, and figures have been discussed with the two community councils. It's right on the border between Forth and Luton Head, so that the idea was it would be split 50-50. And people have come to us identifying various projects which they'd be keen to see work on. There was a mention of a walkway down near the Priory floods, that sort of thing. So that's, the community fund would run for 50 years through the life of the project and be index linked. I mean, it's maybe this isn't the place to talk figures, but I mean, separately, this
Yeah,
has been discussed with both community councils.
I wasn't necessarily asking about financial. I was more asking about, if there was like community garden projects that they may be able to work round about your site, somewhere that could maybe make the site maybe more pleasant to look at, sort of thing. Wildflower meadow or something round about it, anything like that that would be good for the community would help. Thank you.
Alan, I see your hand up. Do you wish to make a comment?
I think it's just worth being clear on that point, convener, that any offer of community benefit is not a material planning consideration. It's not something we should be taking into account in the determination of the application. Certainly, I think in terms of Councillor Durno's wider point, the proposal does make provision for fairly generous landscaping around the perimeter. So hopefully through time that will provide some mitigation to address the concerns that have been raised by the community. But just to be clear, the community benefit, not matter you should take into account in the determination of the application.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions to Mr. Grierson? I don't see any other hands up, Sarah.
No further questions, convener.
There's nothing on my screen. Okay, move on to comments. Would any members who would like to make comments at this stage? Councillor King, followed by Councillor Brace. You're on mute, Councillor King.
I keep on forgetting to unmute myself. Yes, convener, I looked at this application very, very carefully and looked at it very, very carefully in consideration of a very similar application at Crudy Acres in Arbroath, just at the boundary of Arbroath, but just outside the boundary of Arbroath. I found that this was very, very similar. In fact, the one at Arbroath was even closer to housing. And that had been refused by the council, and it went to the Development Management Review Committee. The Development Management Review Committee granted it after a site visit, which I think Councillor Moore was present. So, I mean, I don't see very much different in this site to the one at Arbroath. And as was said at the time, the governments, both Scottish Government and UK Government, are now pursuing electrification very rapidly, and electrical storage is going to be critical if we're going to achieve the targets that have been set. And this is the way forward. We're going to see many of these sites coming forward. As I remember, when the pre-applications came in, there was one for another site on the other side of Old Brecon Road. There was a competition for two. This one has come forward with full planning application, and I think the officers have got it 100% right in their recommendation for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Brace, followed by Councillor Duff.
Well, yes, I would concur largely with Councillor King there. Battery storage is essential at the moment, and as we make the transition from fossil fuels. I would comment, though, that it was very interesting. It was really quite stark to see the photograph looking towards Forfar along the road, where you saw the existing substation, and then contrasted that with what's to be provided by way of screening with this new battery storage facility, if approved. I just think that this is a major step forward compared to what we were allowing many years ago, because the old substation will look like a real eyesore compared to this new one. And I think my other comment on this is that this is a very expensive project, I would assume, and I would really hope that the developer wouldn't stint on the amount of money they're going to spend on the screening of it. And I would hope that some quite mature trees can be put in so that it can be screened as soon as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Duff, followed by Councillor Moore.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Yes, I mean, I would completely agree with what Councillor Bray says there, and also what Councillor King has said. Like Councillor King, I was on the site visit to the proposal on the edge of Arbroath, which was very, very similar. It was adjacent to a substation, just marginally outside the development boundary in Arbroath, and the DMRC approved that one. And this looks very similar. We have declared a climate emergency as a council. We've had COP26. We need to decarbonise, and as various people have said, we need to use battery technology to buffer supply when the wind turbines are not running and the sun's not shining. So yeah, we don't think we have any choice here. We've got to go ahead and utilise this technology. And yes, I wonder what the planning committee of Forfar Town Council was doing when that substation was built, why we didn't require some screening, because every substation I've ever seen is an eyesore, and with a bit of sensible screening we could greatly improve the visual amenity. But I guess that was done in the 50s and 60s or whatever, when we perhaps weren't as concerned with those things as we are now. But yes, an excellent development, happy to support it.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, as Councillor King said, I was on the DMRC visit to Cruddy Acres. The project was excellent. The only reason I didn't support it there was because of the access to it, which I thought was in a dangerous location. This isn't. This is, you've got good views either side. If we can get decent screening from day one, rather than getting twigs, as the developers offered to get, get good screening, get it developed, get the SUDs working, then yes, it is something that we need. Let's give it, support it, and let it get off the ground and get it on, supplying need as soon as possible.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor, no. I see no other hands up. Is there no other hands up? No.
No, no, convener.
Okay. Well, move on. Yes, I'm quite happy with this planning application. I think this is a necessity as we move forward, doing away with fossil fuels. It will be a necessity in the future. I have solar panels and I've actually a battery in my garage, so I'm quite happy to move this for approval, because it's a necessity in the future. Is that agreed?
I would like to move an amendment.
We have an amendment. So do I have a seconder for my motion for approval?
Yes, convener, Alec King.
Right, thank you. Councillor Brown, I'll have your amendment now.
The reasons for the refusal is out with the local development plan. 2, contrary to the policy PV1, green infrastructure, protecting wildlife and open space. 3, contrary to the policy PV3, new development should protect green networks. 4, contrary to the policy PV6, development in landscape industrial development to landscape's impact. And 5, contrary to the policy DS4, amenity, air quality, noise levels and odours and dust. This building is going to be right next a play park and 2 football pitches, which is covered with children all weekend. It's beside White Hills Hospital, the White Hills School, many families' homes within the proposed of children, and including Lunan Head. And it's for that reason I will support the many objectors. There have been several accidents up and down the country. We have not been given any assurances these battery storage units as fire risks seems to a concern with this facility. I am moving that we refuse permission for this application.
Do you have a seconder, Councillor Brown?
I don't know.
Is there a seconder to Councillor Brown's amendment?
No seconder, convener.
Well, therefore, I take it the motion is carried for approval
Agreed.
with the conditions attached.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Move on to agenda item 7. This is for planning application at Teeling Parish Church. This report deals with planning application for the conversion of the disused church to a dwelling house and associated works at the former Teeling Parish Church, Teeling. Can we have the slides, please? Well, as I say, there's 2 applications here and we'll deal with them both in one presentation. Is that correct, Mr. Hunter?
That is indeed correct, convener. So items 7 and 8. Item 7 is a planning application that provides for the change of use from a disused church to a house and associated works. Item 8 is a listed building consent application that relates to physical alterations to the building to facilitate its use as a house. Here we see the general location of the application site itself. We have the church building that you can see just in the centre of the screen, identified with the cursor, located within the small hamlet of Kirkton of Teeling. You can see the old graveyard associated with the church and the new cemetery extension located to the south of the graveyard. A couple of things just to draw out from this slide. We have a representation from a neighbour who raises concern regarding overlooking loss of privacy in relation to garden area, and that's principally in relation to a first floor window within the gable of the church building. So this is the gable in question, and this is the garden area that's potentially affected. So we have a separation distance of about 17 metres between the existing gable window and the boundary with the neighbouring property. That distance complies with the separation distances specified in council guidance, and you can perhaps note that the garden area associated with the property is reasonably extensive. So in that respect, impacts on the amenity of the neighbour are not considered to be significant. Also some concerns regarding, and just to confirm, my understanding is from colleagues in the Park Service that it's the western access that's used by council workers and by people attending funerals to access the cemetery extension. This is the area where there is active burial at the present time. So it's the access to the west that's used principally to facilitate access to the cemetery at the present time. Just a plan that shows the extent of the application site. We have the footprint of the existing building, and that's essentially what is in the ownership of the applicant. The land that surrounds the church building, sorry, I should say we've got the Hearst House located in this location as well, also in the ownership of the applicant, and the proposal is to use that building for garaging associated with the house. So no physical alteration to the category B listed Hearst House. It's simply used for parking. The church building itself, category A listed building, so a highly significant listed building, been largely out of use or underused since round about the mid-1980s. So a fairly significant period where the building has been unused or underused. Round about the church building is in the ownership of the council, and that's principally the reason why the application is before you today. We have 2 objections to the application, so this is not a matter that would ordinarily come to Development Standards Committee, but because the council has an interest in the application as landowner in relation to part of the site, the applications are before you today. In relation to the land in council ownership, the proposal is to install a wastewater treatment plant within the footways associated with the graveyard, and that would discharge to an infiltration tunnel system, so a soak-away system, again located within the footways of the graveyard. Just a photograph that shows the building in its current condition. You have the public road located at the left-hand side of the screen, some informal parking associated with the cemetery at the present time, the hearse house that would be used to accommodate parking and storing, and the listed building itself. You can see from the photographs in terms of its external appearance, it's very plain. The principal interest in relation to this building relates to monuments that are contained within the building, and it's those that fundamentally justify its Category A listed status. In terms of the proposal itself, very little alteration to the building. These are the elevations that show the building as it would be provided. Main changes relate to replacement of the windows. You'll notice from the slides that the windows are currently boarded up. The windows are in very poor condition. Majority require to be replaced, and those need to be replaced in a manner that's sympathetic to the listed building. And you'll see we have conditions attached to both recommendations that require the precise details of those windows to be submitted and subsequently approved. Also, in the east-facing elevation, there is render on the gable, and the proposal is to remove that render and expose the original stonework with repair and repointing as appropriate with lime mortar. And again, we have conditions that seek to ensure that's done in the most appropriate manner. This is a photograph of the building. I think this one dates from around about 2016, and you can see at that point the roof was covered with a tarpaulin. I think there was water ingress at that point, and that water ingress was damaging the interior fabric of the building. So it was covered. Repair work was undertaken around about 2017. A steel beam was inserted to help support the upper floor gallery, and remedial repair work at that time. Again, you can see a very plain, a very simple building. This is moving around. This is looking at the west-facing elevation of the facing gable and the south-facing elevation. Again, this I think is a 2016 photograph, so you can see the buildings it's beginning to deteriorate. And there is a desire, there is a policy presumption in favour of working towards new uses for existing buildings. A residential use within a graveyard is not something that everyone would wish to stay in, but we do have other examples of this taking place within Angus at Oath Law, Kirkton of Kinnettles. I think there's similar development. And we also have, unfortunately, examples in Angus. I can think of Kinnell Church, where a successful approach hasn't occurred, and the listed building is rapidly deteriorating. And in this case, we think that there is very good justification to allow reuse of a listed building that will help sustain the fabric of the property, and that will help maintain the amenity of the overall graveyard and the adjacent cemetery. Just again, moving around, this is the east-facing elevation, and you can see the render that's been applied to that gable, and that will be removed and the original stonework exposed and repaired. Again, the area of hard standing that you see here, the water treatment plant would be provided, and an air source heat pump also provided in association with the building. But the external alterations very sympathetic to the character of the building itself. The interior of the property. I apologise for the quality of the images, but these seek to identify the key memorials within the property, and you can perhaps make those out just identified on the drawing that you see, and those correspond with the images on this screen. You can perhaps also get an impression of the deterioration in the internal character of the building. The fabric has deteriorated through the passage of time. Around about 30 years it's been unused, underused, and it's lacked investment and maintenance over that time. So this is an opportunity to secure a new use that allows for the maintenance of the building and allows for the preservation of the highly significant memorials that are contained therein. If we look at the internal alteration, this is the ground floor. You can see it's retained principally as a large open plan space, so that's maintaining its ecclesiastical character, and we have provision for them to remain exposed, and also for the pulpit to be retained as a feature within the ground floor of the property. Moving to the upper floor, we have a gallery area, and again the gallery is retained, but it's subdivided to provide bedroom and storage accommodation within the upper floor area. Existing window openings are retained, and as I've indicated, the windows replaced, repaired where appropriate, but detail of that subject to further approval. Should say the application, the listed building consent application, has been subject to consultation with Historic Environment Scotland, and HES has confirmed that it finds the proposal sympathetic to the overall character of the building, that internal treatment is something that it supports as a means of securing the safeguarding of the building. Finally, just again shows the exterior of the building. You can see there is the graveyard. There's no private amenity space associated with the property itself, but council policies don't require the provision of private amenity space in circumstances where we're looking at conversion of an existing property. And this is an instance appropriate to facilitate reuse of the building, to safeguard the Category A listed building. Yes, there are concerns raised by some locals regarding impact on the wider graveyard, but you'll see our Parks and Burial Grounds colleagues are supportive of the application, have raised no objection, and I think that the benefiting the reuse of the building, the benefit in securing the building in a condition that prevents its further deterioration is something ultimately that's beneficial to the amenity. Both applications are consistent with council policy. They're consistent with national guidance that requires us to have special regard to the desirability of safeguarding, preserving the listed building, and on that basis, both applications are recommended for approval subject to the conditions before you. Thank you, Convener.
Right, thank you, Alan. Any questions to Mr. Hunter? No questions?
Councillor Braze, I think, just had his hand up there, Convener.
Councillor Braze?
Yeah, 1 second, Convener. My apologies, Convener. Yes, I actually went down and had a look at the site yesterday, and I do have concerns about car parking down there. When I arrived, the car parking spaces outside the gate were full, and there was nowhere for me to go except round the turning circle and back out the road. And I just wondered who owns that turning circle, because if that was ever fenced off, I think it would be a major problem.
I've got no information in relation to ownership of the Turning Circle, Councillor Bray's. I suspect it's possibly in the ownership of the farm. It appears effectively to be part of the farm court. In relation to parking provision, as I've indicated, the intention is to use the Hearse House, and there is potential to allow turning within the hard standing area or the solid area associated with that. I don't think the Hearse House is in use as car parking at the present time. The informal car parking that exists at the north gate to the application site, I believe, is controlled by the council. And again, our parks colleagues have indicated they have no objection to its use in association with the property, provided there's still access maintained for council staff to access the old graveyard for grass cutting and similar purposes. But our roads colleagues are satisfied with the proposal in terms of road safety issues.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? No other questions? I see no other hands up. With no speakers, any comments at this stage? Councillor Durno, comment?
Yeah. Thanks, convener. I just think it's great that we're being able to reuse some of these churches and turn them into beautiful buildings. And I just wish there'd be a lot more that could be done, because it's so sad to see them sitting there going to ruin, and quite look forward to seeing this when it's finished. I think it'll be lovely. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Brace, followed by Councillor Moore.
Well, yes, thanks, convener. I think that that the conversion of this church into a dwelling house, I think, is a wonderful thing. It will preserve it, and it'll stop it going to rack and ruin and being lost to the community. While I do have an awful lot of sympathy with the occupier of Kirton-na-Teeling Farm, I really feel that that he's going to land up with cars using that turning circle all the time on his property. I do have concerns that he might get fed up and fence it off, and it'll be very difficult. However, I don't see any grounds that I could raise an amendment on to stop this application at all, and so I think it should go ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, convener. Yes, well, I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to convert it and to make habitation out of it. I am sorry that it has fallen into disrepair and disuse, like quite a few churches around, including in my own village of Dunnican. So the way it's been improved, revised, looking at the plans, keeping the memorials in place while insulating underfloor, making it what could be or will be a very nice property. My only query in it whatsoever is I look at the first floor, bedroom 1 and 2 have en suites, bedroom 3 has to go downstairs to the bathroom. So difference. Yes, it is something that we should be supporting. Let's get both these buildings protected. Let's get them developed, and hopefully let's be able to go back and see the final result and see just how much we have supported keeping these buildings in use.
Right, thank you, Councillor Moore. Any other comments? No other comments at this stage. I'll be moving this application for approval. heard Councillor Moore mention Dinnican. Dinnican has been very successfully developed into residential property, and I just look forward to see this happening at Teeling as well. So I'm moving this for approval with the conditions attached. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
We'll move on to the listing building consent, agenda item 8. Any members have any questions to the officer on the listed building consent? No. No speakers. Anybody wish to comment and touch on this? No. Well, I'll just be moving for listed building approval. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Right, thank you. Move on to agenda item number 8. This is a pre-application note for land at Elliott Industrial Estate, Arbroath. Do you wish to give us a briefing on this, Mr. Hunter?
I have slides if slides are required, convener, but just to remind members, this is the site where council resolved to grant planning permission for large-scale retail development in 2019. The site has been purchased by a different landowner who has a slightly revised proposal. We don't have details of specifically what that proposal is. But the report before you identifies the likely issues, key issues in relation to determination of any subsequent application that's submitted. Council resolved that the proposal was contrary to the development plan, but identified significant material considerations that justified approval of that development. And the existence of the extant planning permission, the 2019 permission remains extant. That would be a significant consideration in the determination of any application that comes before us in the future.
Thank you. Okay, well, there's an opportunity for members to bring forward any comments to the Planning Authority before this comes to the committee again for approval. Councillor King, I did see your hand up. Councillor King, you're on mute.
That's it. Sorry, convener. At the 2019 consideration, I expressed my concerns about the access to this site. The A92 there is a very busy road, so busy that we've had to install traffic lights for the access to the adjoining. I'm concerned at the traffic coming in and out of this site, and we may have to install traffic lights or a roundabout at the access of this, and that should be part of the conditions on any future planning permission. The other thing I raised, and I know that the owners of the adjacent site are not keen on this, but there should be connection between the two sites so that people entering one site do not have to come out of it and travel along the A92 to re-enter the other site. If you enter one site, you should be able to transfer between the two sites. And these are the situations that I raised in 2019, and I'm just raising them for the record now to ask the planners to look at that particular situation and perhaps impose a condition that there should be interconnectivity between the two sites.
Okay, thank you, noted. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, convener. Yes, there's consideration of the natural environment, of the proposed access arrangements. What I'm not seeing is sustainability. I'd like to see them addressing how they're going to help, provide power for electric cars and hybrids, for example, where they're going forward with, anything that is going to improve the situation and reduce our carbon footprint. It doesn't seem to be in that list, and I think it should be.
Right, thank you, Councillor Moore. Okay, this is just a pre-application notice, so members can get anything into planning they think want to be considered later on. If there's no other comments at the moment, if there's No other comments at the moment. That finishes our agenda for today. I'd just like to thank you all for attending, and we'll close the meeting.
Thank you.